Hey everyone. All right, let's get to remote learning. So today we're going to learn about ellipses and dashes, and maybe some commas while we're in there, because who doesn't love a good review? So ellipses, those are the three little periods, right? These three dots right here. They serve a few purposes. They give a longer pause than a comma, about a short sigh, right? So where a comma is a breath, you say, when I was at the store, breathe in, I found all the milk was gone. And ellipses is a little bit longer than that. So it's like, I went to the store and everything was gone, right? So you give that sort of out breath, that little bit of a sigh, and that gives that break. It's also used to indicate that something is missing, right? And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, you know what? I think I'm going to change this from missing to omitted, meaning it's gone on purpose. Yeah, right. So with reporting, you see that they take it out all the time. But when something, sometimes someone gets interrupted. So let's see what they look like, right? So when a character doesn't finish a thought or needs to think a moment, it's like, I wish I. But let's not dwell on that, right? If only, there's nothing to be done now, right? I only mention it because sometimes there's a man. I won't say hero because what's a hero, right? Like you switch it up a little bit. So it gives that pause, that break to sort of sigh and breathe and let sort of the audience come in, right, to see what's going on. When in reporting, though, or quotes, right, this is definitely used in academic papers. It's used in reporting. I use these a whole lot. Here's an example of when we might want to use it. For example, the complete uncut quote is, the whole team, who had been through all 50 states and managed to track down a pepperoni pizza in every one they visited, was glad to be home. Now, if I'm reading an article and space is limited, I don't care about the pepperoni pizza at this particular moment. So I'm going to cut out this entire parenthetical right here, right? Remember parentheticals? Information put in between two commas in the middle of a sentence, right? That extra information. I'm just going to cut that out, replace it with the three dots. And the key information that the whole team was glad to be home, it still makes sense. That's when you use parentheticals. You don't want to use it to leave out key pieces of information. You'll see that in some news sites, though, is that they'll leave out key pieces of information. If you're worried about a quote being misattributed or something from a corporation that doesn't sound quite right, you'll want to look at that full quote, because sometimes this information, which isn't always about pepperoni pizza, is going to be super important. We'll look at another example here. With the White House and Obama, with the murder of Trayvon Martin. The White House issued a statement in which Obama characterized Martin's death as a tragedy, not just for his family, but for America. The full quote is, the death of Trayvon Martin was a tragedy, not just for his family or for any one community, but for America. So are both of these good? No. The first one isn't good because nothing's taken out, right? Because it's the same. So adding these three extra dots actually takes up more space than just having it be a regular sentence. So why someone would do this, I don't know. It serves no purpose. However, this second one, works just fine, because this is that extra information that isn't necessary when reporting, but definitely is good for speech giving or rhetoric. When you get into 9th grade, you'll talk about rhetoric and why you might want to add these parentheticals in there for extra effect. So this is when it would be good to use it. This is when it's not good. And I didn't really look, but there are examples of these ellipticals right here that are of poor use being used to hide very important information. And so just make sure that if you see any quote that looks like this, if they use parentheticals a lot in a citation, right? If if the newspaper has a quote from somebody and there's like 2 or 3 parentheticals, you might want to look for the actual statement. And that, that's online. That's if you're reading a newspaper or anything like that. If you see 2 or 3 in a sentence, you might want to look up the full quote just to see if anyone's misleading you. But that's pretty much it for ellipses. So this is a more practical use for them. Here is in reporting. And then if you're writing a short story or you're writing a poem, this is when you would want to use it to sort of indicate that pause and to draw attention to what is being said and then also what is not being said, right? Like what does this mean? Like I wish I what, right? There's that mystery. Whereas right here it's like, I'm not going to, he's sort of clarifying why he's saying man instead of hero, right? Because what's a hero, right? What is a hero? We talked about that in archetypes. So hopefully you remember. If not, well, review. Okay. All right, so let's look at dashes. Dashes essentially just say, look at this, right? So they're really good at putting emphasis on what is happening next, right? They're really good for writing action or shouting interruptions in your story, right? If we look at this graph, enough talk, right? Like, get to the point, so this dash right here is going to tell us that we need to pay attention to what's being said next. Sometimes dashes can be a little iffy to type. Normally, I'll show you what you can do. So if you're typing, we say great job, and then if I'm being interrupted, I'm going to do dash, and then I'm going to hit spacebar again, and then type, and you see how that extends itself. So that works when you're typing it for sentences like this. But if we're copying, right, we can just type it here and then make the edit, and that will change. So that's how you type one. So let me see if I can fix this. So if we look at this graph, space quote, there, see, and now it fixes it. So that's how you type a dash. However, if you find that to be too difficult, you can come up here to symbol, and we can look for the dash, which should be somewhere up here. And if you haven't ever seen this before, now's a fun time for you to look at it. You can use all of these for a lot of fun effects, the A for aether and all the umlauts and the degrees and all this stuff, omega, right? So all this fun stuff, sigma, beta, these are your Greek symbols. But here are some dashes right here, right? N dash, M dash, horizontal bar, right? So these are the 3 that you look for if you don't want to just do the type thing. If I use the M dash, it makes a much longer dash. So this is an N dash, this is an M dash, so if I might want to use actually this here. So I'm just, whoops, that's not what I wanted. Come back. We can get rid of this actually, sorry. So what I can do here is I can actually just X that, Control X for cut, and then Control V and put that there. And so once I close this though, it looks even more dramatic. And that way we know something's going to happen next, right? So here would be, look at this graph, enough talk. We thought we were done for until the Rohirrim arrived, right? Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, in case you didn't get it. But it's that there's a pause there for that extra emphasis, right? It's like, gosh, a good example would be in Ice Age when they meet the weasel with one eye, and he's like, but did you die? And he's like, yes, dash, but I lived, right? It gives that extra emphasis, westward the wagons, across the sands of time until we, oh, look at me, I'm rambling again, right? It gives that extra emphasis about what's happening next. So here is an example in a poem by Edgar Allan Poe where he uses a lot of dashes. And if you look at some of his other poems, he uses a ton. So if we read it here, right? The bowers whereat in dreams I see, the wantonest singing birds are lips, and all thy melody of lip-begotten words. Thine eyes in heaven of heart enshrined, then desolately fall. O God, in my funeral mind, like starlight on a pall. Thy heart, I wake and sigh, and sleep to dream till day of the truth that gold can never buy, of the baubles that it may. Right? So this is a good example of using that dash for extra emphasis and adding capitalization. So he's like screaming to this lady. He's like, thy heart, oh, I love thee. Right? Like it's very intense, and that's what those dashes are used for. It's meant to give those extra emphases and extra, look at this. This is what's happening. Pay attention to what I'm about to say. So it's like a giant line pointing to the next thing that you're about to say, saying, look, right? It's a neon sign saying this next part that I'm about to say is super emphatic, right? There's a lot of emphasis put on this. And so I actually have this in the wrong order because I wrote this poem because I had a difficult time finding ellipses in poems. But I wrote a poem where it's this parent and their child at McDonald's, and the kid is very indecisive. What do you want? I want this restaurant. Do they have? We're out. No nuggies? It's broken again. Burger with cheese. Playpen? Of course, kiddo. Can we stay? I said no. Not today. Right? So it gives you that extra pause, that sort of pensive mode to sort of think about it. If you watch a lot of movies, there are a lot of great moments of thought and just them thinking and just sort of giving that pause like I did just right there, that ... That's a time for your characters to think. But if you're going to quote, if you're going to cite, papers or articles, and they have a ton of detail. So if you wanted to quote, a paragraph, but, the middle parts of that paragraph aren't that great, and Mr. Erickson tells me you can't copy and paste an entire paragraph into your paper, that's unethical because that takes up 50% of your paper. What you can do is you can use an ellipses to essentially get to the point, right? Because if any of you copy and pasted this whole paragraph into an essay, that's a huge problem. Let's see, does this give me a word? It doesn't. But this is a lot of words, especially when so much, the only thing you need is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Like all you need is 8 words, but you're giving me 20 something, right? I don't need that. Your paper doesn't need it. I mean, sure, it pads your paper, but that's not good writing, and it doesn't make you look like a better writer. So avoid using whole paragraphs. Use the ellipses instead. It's a great tool for academic writing. It's really good for artful writing if you want to include those pauses. So if you're writing a short story or a poem and you want to give the image that your character is thinking without saying, and my dad thought, right? Instead, you could just say, for example, right here, I said no, right? So without an ellipses, without that good image, I would say dad then thought, period, not today. So instead, I can just get rid of this, or whoops, not what I wanted, this, and just go ... And those 3 dots in our minds give us that image of a dad thinking, right? And so with dashes, right? It's the same. It gives us that moment of, oh, I need to quickly move my eyes across this line and get to the next part, right? Enough talk. How about you, right? Attack, attack, blah, 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 right? Or enough talk, we must strike when we have the upper hand. Whoops, not strick. Right? We must strike while the iron is hot. Right? What's this called? I'm going to Dora the Explorer you. Strike while the iron is hot. How many of you know what that's actually called? Right? If you don't, look it up, pause the video for like 30 seconds, Google it. For those of you who do know and don't like me pulling a Dora, it's called an idiom, right? It's something that doesn't necessarily mean this, but it's a blacksmithing term, right? Because you pull the iron out of the fire and then you strike it with a hammer to shape it what you want. So, but this, like I said, this dash gives you that extra emphasis. So hopefully this made some sense. I really hope so. But replay this video again if you need to. If you have any questions, go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'll be able to answer them as best I can. All right, good luck.